Imagine a world where the very atmosphere you breathe is not oxygen, but pure, unadulterated love. In this realm, there is no shadow of suspicion, no sting of rejection, and no cold wall of indifference. Every heart is like a perfectly tuned string in a vast, celestial orchestra, vibrating in total harmony with every other soul. There is no pride to create distance, no envy to poison relationships, and no selfishness to interrupt the flow of divine affection. It is a place where you are fully known and yet more deeply loved than the human heart can currently conceive. A kingdom where the sun never sets, because the glory of love itself is its eternal light. Jonathan Edwards, often remembered for the thundering terrors of judgment, here unveils the radiant destination of the redeemed, heaven, not merely as a place of golden streets, but as a world of love. He invites us to look past the temporal pains of this broken life and behold a society where love is the beginning, the middle, and the end of all existence. Edwards argues that the soul was designed for an infinite object of affection, and that our earthly loves are but flickering candles compared to the blazing sun of the love that reigns in the presence of the Almighty. It is a vision that transforms our understanding of eternity from a static rest into a dynamic, ever-increasing ocean of joy. In this world of love, the great fountainhead is God himself, a being of infinite beauty who is, in his very essence, love. Edwards describes God as an inexhaustible ocean of light and warmth, constantly pouring himself into the vessels of his creatures. There is no scarcity in heaven. The more love one receives, the more one is capable of giving, creating a holy circulation of bliss that grows deeper and richer through the ages. The Father, the Son, and the Spirit dwell in a perfect communion that overflows to every angel and every saint, ensuring that no soul is ever lonely and no heart is ever empty. Edwards' message serves as a profound healing balm for a world weary of conflict and division. He posits that our present life is a desert, but heaven is the land of many springs. Here love is often hindered by our corruption, misunderstood by our neighbors, or cut short by the grave. But in the world to come, love is perfected, eternal, and free from every encumbrance. It is a place where perfect love casts out fear forever, and where the saints look upon one another with a delight that is pure, constant, and holy. To enter heaven is to finally come home to the environment for which we were truly created. The Heaven is a World of Love discourse is perhaps the most eloquent description of the beatific vision ever penned. Edwards moves from the logic of a philosopher to the heart of a poet, showing that the excellence of Christ is the magnet that draws all hearts into one. He challenges us to consider that if we do not love the atmosphere of love now, we would be miserable in heaven, for heaven is nothing less than the triumph of love over all its enemies. It is a call to begin the life of heaven on earth by cultivating a spirit of divine charity that reflects the character of the world to come. As we step into this luminous exposition, let the noise of the world fade away. Edwards invites us to stand on the borders of the celestial city and catch a glimpse of the Garden of Delights, where the Savior walks with his people. This is the ultimate method of grace, not just to save us from hell, but to bring us into a fellowship so intimate and a joy so profound that eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, its fullness. Prepare your heart to behold the end of your journey, a world where every tear is wiped away by the hand of infinite love. If you are enjoying this message, please leave a like to help me reach more people with these blessed messages. Also, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Heaven is a World of Love is the final section of Jonathan Edwards' series of sermons on 1 Corinthians 13, collectively known as Charity and Its Fruits. Preached in 1738, during the quiet years between the early stirrings of revival and the full-blown Great Awakening, this sermon represents the pinnacle of Edwards' ethical and eschatological thought. While he could brilliantly describe the terrors of the law, his ultimate goal was always to display the sweetness and excellency of divine grace. In this discourse, Edwards moves systematically from the nature of God as the source of love to the specific characteristics of the heavenly society. He rejects the idea of heaven as a lonely or purely individualistic state, insisting instead that it is a social world, a community of perfected beings bound together by their shared vision of God. For Edwards, Holiness and happiness are inseparable, and both find their perfection in the exercise of love. The historical context of the sermon is vital. Edwards was speaking to a congregation in a colonial frontier town, people who knew the harshness of winter, the threat of war, and the reality of early death. To them, the promise of a world of love was not a sentimental abstraction, but a necessary anchor for their souls. He provided a metaphysical map of the future that gave profound meaning to their present struggles, urging them to live as citizens of that higher country. In these 4 introductory paragraphs, we prepare to explore a vision that has comforted and challenged believers for nearly 3 centuries. We will see how Edwards defines the inhabitants of this world, the nature of their affection, and the circumstances that make their love so perfect. This is Jonathan Edwards at his most elevated, leading us to the threshold of a glory that transcends language, where the only remaining word is love. Jonathan Edwards begins his transcendent journey into the celestial realm by asserting that heaven is a world of love primarily because it is the peculiar dwelling place of God, who is the eternal, uncreated, and inexhaustible fountain of all love. He argues that just as the sun is the source of all light and warmth for the physical world, so God is the spiritual sun of the universe, and in heaven his rays are not filtered through the thick clouds of sin, nor dimmed by the distance of a fallen world, but shine with a direct, overwhelming, and transformative brilliance upon every soul. Edwards posits that the very essence of the Godhead is a communion of infinite love between the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, a holy and eternal circulation of delight that existed before the foundations of the world were laid. Therefore, for a creature to enter heaven is to be invited into the overflow of this divine fellowship. He describes God not as a static monarch, but as an active, pouring ocean of sweetness, constantly communicating his own beauty and happiness to the saints and angels, ensuring that every vessel is filled to its utmost capacity. In this world of love, the presence of God is immediate, meaning that the redeemed no longer see through a glass darkly, nor do they rely on the outward means of grace, the Word, the sacraments, or the shadows of creation, but they behold the beatific vision face to face, drinking directly from the river of his pleasures. Edwards insists that this vision of God's glory is what kindles the flame of love in the hearts of the inhabitants, for it is impossible to behold such infinite excellence without being ravished by a corresponding affection. He deconstructs the earthly experience of love, which is often hindered by our inability to truly see one another or to fully perceive the goodness of God, and contrasts it with the heavenly state where the faculty of the soul is expanded to comprehend the breadth, length, depth, and height of a love that surpasses knowledge. The preacher argues that in heaven, God reveals himself in the face of Jesus Christ with such clarity that the soul is transformed into the same image, moving from glory to glory as it gazes upon the chiefest among 10,000. Edwards uses the metaphor of light to explain the purity of this love, noting that in heaven there is no darkness of misunderstanding, no shadow of selfishness, and no coldness of heart, for the fire of divine love consumes everything that is inconsistent with its own nature. He describes the Father as the source, the Son as the radiant expression, and the Spirit as the very breath and atmosphere of this love, showing that the Trinity itself is the blueprint for the perfect society of heaven. For Edwards, the preciousness of heaven does not lie in its jasper walls or pearly gates, but in the fact that it is a world where God is all in all, and since God is love, the entire realm is saturated with that divine quality. He posits that the love of the saints in heaven is a reflex act, a holy echo of the love that God first pours into them, creating a magnificent harmony where the Creator and the creature are united in a bond of eternal complacency. The preacher is careful to note that while God's love is infinite and the creature's love is finite, there is no sense of lack or frustration, for every saint is as full of love and joy as they can possibly be, just as a small vial and a great ocean can both be full, even if their capacities differ. Edwards insists that this atmosphere of love is what makes heaven heavenly, suggesting that without the love of God, the celestial city would be a magnificent prison, for it is the presence of the beloved that constitutes the paradise of the soul. He argues that in this world we only taste occasional drops of this love, which are often mixed with the bitterness of our own corruption, but in the world of love, we shall be swallowed up in the ocean itself. This section serves to reorient the listener's desire away from the broken cisterns of earthly affection and toward the fountain of living waters, emphasizing that true happiness consists in being a partaker of the divine nature. Edwards portrays the life of heaven as a perpetual falling in love with the infinite beauty of God, a process that is never ending because the object of affection is inexhaustible. He challenges the formalist, who seeks heaven merely to escape pain, asserting that unless one loves God for his own sake, one would find no joy in a world where his love is the only currency. This block is designed to elevate the soul into a state of holy longing, making the glories of this present world seem dim and tasteless in comparison to the weight of glory that resides in the presence of the Father. Edwards' goal is to prove that love is the greatest of the virtues, because it is the only one that will survive the transition into the eternal state, where faith will be turned into sight and hope into fruition, leaving love as the sole remaining sovereign. By the end of this exposition, the listener is meant to see heaven not as a distant, abstract concept, but as a vibrant, pulsing reality of affection that is already calling to the deep places of the human heart. The source has been revealed, and now Edwards prepares to describe the channels through which this love flows, the society of the redeemed who reflect the light of the sun. Jonathan Edwards proceeds to describe the glorious inhabitants of this world of love, portraying the society of heaven as a perfect reflection of the divine harmony, where every angel and every redeemed soul is knit together in a bond of unalloyed affection that far surpasses any earthly friendship. He argues that in this celestial city, the poison of the soul, which consists of envy, pride, and selfishness, is utterly banished, leaving a vacuum that is immediately filled by the sweetness of mutual delight. Edwards posits that one of the most magnificent features of this society is the total absence of envy. In our fallen world, the honor or happiness of another often breeds a secret bitterness in the observer, but in heaven, the joy of one is the joy of all. He explains that while there are different degrees of glory and different capacities for reward among the saints, represented by the greater and lesser vessels, there is no friction or discontent, for the greater saints look upon the lesser with a tender fatherly love, and the lesser look upon the greater with a pure, ungrudging admiration, as if their neighbor's crown were their own. This creates a state of universal benevolence, where every heart is transparent, and every soul is a mirror reflecting the light of Christ onto every other soul. Edwards describes the angels as ministering spirits who have loved the saints from afar during their earthly pilgrimage and who now welcome them into the heavenly family with a joy that is holy and intense. He insists that in heaven there are no strangers, for the love of God acting as the common center draws all inhabitants into an intimacy so profound that they know one another's hearts as clearly as they are known by God. This social nature of heaven is essential to Edwards's vision, as he argues that God did not create us to be isolated islands of bliss, but to be part of a vast, integrated body, where the circulation of love is constant and increasing. He deconstructs the earthly barriers of language, race, and station, showing that in the world of love, the only rank that exists is the rank of capacity to love God, and even this disparity serves only to increase the harmony of the whole. Much like the different notes in a musical chord produce a beauty that a single note could never achieve. The preacher utilizes the imagery of a family in its most perfect form, where the father is the source of authority and love, and the children find their greatest pleasure in pleasing him and one another. He argues that the love of the saints for each other is pure, meaning it is entirely free from any carnal or selfish motive. They love one because they see the image of Christ in one another, and as that image is perfect in heaven, so their love is without flaw. Edwards portrays a world where suspicion is an unknown concept. There is no need for masks, no fear of betrayal, and no hidden agendas, for every inhabitant is full of light and full of love. He describes the conversations of heaven not as the idle chatter of earth, but as the communion of saints, where they recount the wonders of providence, the mysteries of redemption, and the heights of the love of Christ, their voices joining in a symphony of praise that never grows weary. Edwards insists that this mutual love is active, manifesting itself in a perpetual desire to promote the happiness of others, creating a virtuous circle where the more one loves, the more one is loved in return, leading to an ever-ascending spiral of ecstasy. He points out that in this life, our love is often narrowed by our prejudices and our blindness, but in the world to come, our hearts will be as wide as the heavens themselves, capable of embracing the entire multitude which no man can number, with a fervor that on earth is reserved only for our closest kin. To Edwards, the society of the blessed is the ultimate proof that holiness is sweet, for it produces a community where conflict is impossible, and where the peace of God reigns in every interaction. He contrasts this with the society of the damned, where hate is the only law, and where every inhabitant is a tormentor to every other, showing that heaven is the perfection of social existence, just as hell is its total dissolution. This block of the sermon is designed to make the listener homesick for a community they have never seen, but for which their soul was undeniably made. Edwards's goal is to show that we are currently in training for this society, and that our love for the brethren here is the alphabet of the language we will speak fluently in glory. He leaves the audience with a vision of a world where every face is altogether lovely and every heart is altogether loving, suggesting that the highest pleasure of a creature is to be part of a whole that is perfectly devoted to the Creator. By the end of this exposition, the loneliness of the human condition is met with the promise of eternal belonging, as Edwards reveals that to be in heaven is to be surrounded by millions of friends who love you with a perfect, divine, and unchangeable affection. This is the method of grace applied to the body of Christ, the gathering of the scattered fragments of humanity into a single, radiant, and loving whole. Jonathan Edwards deepens his exploration of the celestial realm by examining the specific nature and the resulting happiness of this divine affection, arguing that the love found in heaven is characterized by an absolute stability and a perpetual growth that distinguishes it from the fleeting and often frustrated loves of this fallen world. He begins by asserting that in heaven, love is entirely perfect in its nature, because it is free from the twin enemies of earthly affection, sin and separation. Edwards posits that in our current state, even our holiest loves are tainted by the dross of selfishness, pride, and misunderstanding, which act as barriers to true communion. However, in the world of love, the soul is purified of every corrupt inclination, allowing the flame of affection to burn with a white-hot intensity that never flickers or fades. He describes a state where distrust is an impossible concept, for every inhabitant is perfectly transparent and perfectly sincere, meaning that the love offered is always exactly what it appears to be, a pure, unmixed stream of benevolence flowing from the heart. Edwards highlights the constancy of this love, noting that on earth, even the most passionate affections can grow cold over time or be interrupted by the changes and chances of life. But in heaven, love is as unchangeable as the God who inspires it. There is no fear of losing the love of another, for there is no death to tear friends apart, no sin to cause a breach in fellowship, and no distance to prevent the immediate presence of the beloved. The preacher then reaches one of the most profound points of his theology by declaring that heavenly love is not a static plateau of bliss, but a perpetual increase of delight. He argues that since God is an infinite being of infinite beauty, the saints will spend eternity discovering new depths of his excellence, and as their knowledge of his beauty grows, so their love for him and for one another will grow in equal measure. This creates a dynamic eternity, where the tomorrow of heaven is always more glorious and more loving than its today, an ever-expanding ocean of joy where the soul is constantly being enlarged to hold more of the divine fire. Edwards deconstructs the human fear of boredom or monotony in the afterlife by showing that the world of love is a place of infinite variety and constant novelty, as the manifold wisdom of God is unveiled in ever greater degrees of splendor. He describes the pleasure of love in heaven as being the highest possible happiness for a creature, for man was made in the image of a God who is love, and therefore man only finds his true center and his perfect rest when he is fully immersed in that element. This love is reciprocal in the highest sense. The saints love God with all their being, and they have the direct, sensible assurance that God loves them with an infinite, tender, and complacent affection, a realization that fills the soul with a peace that passes all understanding. Edwards portrays the happiness of this state as being active, not the passive rest of a statue, but the rest of a flame, a state of intense, joyous activity, where the soul is constantly moving toward God in praise, service, and affection. He argues that in heaven there is no unrequited love, for every heart is a perfect vessel that receives the love of others and returns it with interest, creating a sacred commerce of bliss that enriches the whole community. The preacher contrasts this with the sorrows of love on earth, the pain of being unloved, the grief of losing a loved one, and the frustration of being unable to express the depth of our feelings, asserting that in the world to come, every one of these wounds is not only healed, but forgotten in the overwhelming fullness of the Spirit. Edwards insists that this love is proportionate to the capacity of the soul, meaning that every inhabitant is full of joy. Yet because their capacities are eternally expanding, their joy is also eternally increasing. He uses the imagery of the marriage supper of the Lamb to illustrate the intimacy and the festal joy of this state, where the bride, the church, is finally and fully united to her groom, Christ, and where the banner over them is love. To Edwards, the stability of this world is its most comforting feature for the weary pilgrim. He describes heaven as a secure harbor where the storms of life can never reach, and where the anchor of the soul is finally cast into the solid ground of God's unchangeable character. He warns that those who do not learn to love the things of God in this life will have no capacity for the happiness of heaven in the next, for heaven is not merely a change of place, but a perfection of state. The pleasures of sense that dominate the worldling's life are shown to be husks compared to the hidden manna of divine love, which alone can satisfy the immortal cravings of the human spirit. By the end of this block, Edwards has presented a vision of a world where time is no longer a threat, but a servant of joy, providing an infinite duration for an infinite love to unfold. The method of grace is thus seen as a journey from the cold, dark regions of sin to the warm, radiant center of the universe, where the soul finally finds its eternal home in the heart of God. Edwards leaves the listener with the realization that to be in heaven is to be altogether loved and altogether loving, a state of existence so sublime that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with it. Jonathan Edwards concludes his sublime exposition by pivoting from the radiant descriptions of the celestial city to a direct and searching application to the hearts of his listeners, arguing that if heaven is indeed a world of love, then the only way to prepare for such a realm is to cultivate the spirit of divine charity in the present life. He begins by asserting that the life of heaven must begin on earth, for it is impossible for a soul that is habitually filled with malice, envy, or selfishness to find any pleasure in a world where love is the only atmosphere. Edwards posits that our time in this world is a probationary state and a school of grace, where we are either being attuned to the harmonies of heaven or hardened in the discords of hell. He challenges the professing Christian to examine the temper of their soul, asking if they find a sweetness in loving others and a delight in the glory of God, for these are the only true earnests of the future inheritance. The preacher is particularly firm in his exhortation to avoid all bitter contentions, party spirits, and private animosities, asserting that those who live in a state of constant conflict are traveling in a direction entirely opposite to the world of love. He argues that to harbor a grudge or to seek revenge is to carry the coals of hell in one's bosom, which will eventually consume the capacity for heavenly joy. Instead, Edwards compels his audience to press after a spirit of universal benevolence, seeking the good of all men, even their enemies, as a reflection of the sun that shines on both the just and the unjust. He deconstructs the excuse that this world is too cruel for love, reminding his hearers that the saints in heaven were once men and women of like passions who faced the same trials, yet they were transformed by the divine and supernatural light of the Spirit. He insists that every act of self-denial, every word of kindness, and every hidden movement of the heart toward God is a seed sown for the eternal harvest of love. Edwards uses the imagery of citizenship to show that we ought to live as strangers and pilgrims who follow the customs of their true homeland rather than the fashions of the country through which they are merely passing. He warns that a man may have great theological knowledge, perform many religious duties, and possess a form of godliness, but if he lacks charity, he is nothing but a sounding brass that will find no place in the symphonies of the blessed. The preacher emphasizes that the pursuit of love is the most reasonable thing a creature can do, for it is the only path that leads to the fulfillment of the human design. He encourages the poor in spirit and the broken-hearted who feel they have been unloved or rejected by the world, telling them that in Christ they have a friend whose love is the very essence of the heaven they seek. To Edwards, the beauty of holiness is synonymous with the beauty of love, and he begs his congregation to make the attainment of this temper their chief business in life. He portrays the church on earth as a preparatory society, which, despite its flaws, is called to be a miniature heaven, where the world can see a glimpse of the light of the New Jerusalem. He insists that we must labor for love as a man labors for gold, seeing it as the most precious wealth that can be carried through the gates of death. As he nears the end of his appeal, Edwards' tone becomes one of solemn tenderness as he reminds the audience that the door of the world of love is open to all who will truly turn to Christ in faith. He argues that the blood of Christ is the price of this love, and the Spirit of Christ is the bringer of this love, and therefore no one is excluded from this glory except those who exclude themselves through a hard and unloving heart. He leaves them with a vision of the great day when the world of love will be fully revealed, and all the shadows of this life will flee away forever. The method of grace is thus completed. It starts with the conviction of sin, leads through the justification of the soul, and culminates in the perfection of love. Edwards' final word is a call to begin the song of heaven now, for the more we love, the nearer we are to God, and the nearer we are to God, the more we are in heaven. He concludes by urging every soul to set their affection on things above, so that when they are called to leave this world of sorrow, they may find themselves entering a world where they will be swallowed up in love for all eternity. This final block serves to ground the transcendental vision in the moral reality of daily life, making the world of love not just a distant hope, but a present, transforming power. Jonathan Edwards' Heaven is a World of Love stands as the ultimate testament to the sweetness of the Christian hope, proving that the same mind that could envision the terrors of judgment was equally capable of beholding the most exquisite heights of divine affection. This sermon serves as a necessary bridge between the gravity of the law and the levity of grace, reminding us that the goal of all true religion is the restoration of love to its rightful throne in the human heart. Edwards teaches us that heaven is not a place of idle rest, but a world of infinite vitality, where every soul is an active participant in the eternal circulation of God's own happiness. As we reflect on this world of love, we are challenged to look at our current lives and ask if we are learning the language of the kingdom. In an age of division and coldness, Edwards's voice rings out with a luminous urgency, calling us to leave the desert of selfishness and step into the ocean of divine benevolence. May this vision of the beatific society be more than a beautiful dream. May it be the guiding star that leads us through the darkness of this world until we reach that shore where the sun never sets and where love is the only word ever spoken. If you've made it this far, leave a like to help the channel grow, subscribe and activate the notification bell to follow new blessed messages. Also share this video to bless a friend or someone special.